Hey everyone, Mark from The Spark here. Good to have you with me once again. Today's video is going to be a bit of a rant. So I'm going to present some thoughts and ideas to you that hopefully will make you think, depending on where you sit on this particular fence. So, not your usual video that I normally make. It's not a review or an unboxing. Let me start my little rant off with the question, what's a computer? Now, you might know that that line is from a reasonably short-lived 2018 ad campaign from Apple. And according to Business Insider at the time, apparently it infuriated people. The commercial depicted a young girl lying outside on the lawn of her home doing what seems like homework on her iPad Pro, and a neighbour asks about what she's doing on her computer.
What you doing on your computer?
To which the young girl says,
What's
"What's
a computer?"
a computer?" Now, the point of the ad was to highlight the iPad's versatility. Traditional computers had become so obsolete, or they'd evolved so much, that in this imagined Apple universe, even a child didn't recognise what they were. Quite why this ad would infuriate people so much is beyond me. I remember watching the ad at the time and I thought nothing more of it other than thinking the iPad Pro looked amazing and left me wondering when I would be able to afford to buy one. Now, back in 2018, it seems that folks weren't convinced that tablets were the future and that they'd remain content consumption devices evermore. And if you wanted to get proper work done, you needed a real computer like a laptop or a desktop. Now, let's fast forward 6 years later, and though my most recent iPad Pro is many times more powerful than most, if not all, of the laptops from 2018, even now, to a lot of people, they still aren't real computers. Take this little back and forth I had with someone on Threads after I'd posted a photo of my new M4 iPad Pro and mentioned that I'm an iPad only user. Wait, are you a Windows user or a totally no computer and iPad only user? That seems rough. Get a real computer. Lol. It is a real computer. Honestly, I tried, but it can't beat macOS or Windows in many tabs and desktop support. If you just do one task at once, yeah, an iPad will do. Me, I currently have 7 desktops with Edge, Safari, Chrome, a work app and notes, totaling around 64 tabs. It's this level of power usage of a desktop OS, multitasking and RAM management that iPadOS just can't compete with. And now that the M4 iPad Pro is more than the MacBook Air, it makes no sense financially wise to get the iPad over the MacBook. Stuff that I do just can't be done on an iPad. It would probably refresh every time. Lol. Also, I've not shut down this computer at all since January. Saves me time at work and everything's readily available. Desktops 1 to 5 for work and desktop 6 to 7 for personal use. Can an iPad do this? Fair enough. I'm sticking with my iPad. Yeah, I was just proving that iPadOS isn't a real desktop OS. Bring macOS to the iPads and I'll love it. I mean, the chip is the same, just need the OS over. It's not a desktop OS, and it never should be. It's a computer, but it occupies a different space. I mean, I love it, and I've used my iPad as my main computer for years now. I'm a creative and I write and make videos, not just pieces to camera, but music videos, short movies, teaching videos. They serve me really, really well. Yeah, I'll not deny that iPads have a few niche use cases, like on the go and out and about for writing stuff, but for me, I've only used it as a YouTube and video player. Lol. Meanwhile, over on X, formerly Twitter, how much longer are we going to have to say that? A well-meaning individual stated that the new iPad Pro may take over work he would normally do on his MacBook Air. And yet another said that the iPad Pro runs what he considers Mac OS Lite. I could go on I could mention many more examples of this from YouTube and other comment sections, but let me address, to help us with this video, the thread on Threads and provide a response to those comments that I saw posted on X. And in doing so, hopefully, I'll explain well enough why I'm perfectly happy to call my iPad a proper computer, and why I will probably never return to using a traditional laptop. So, the user on Threads stated that they had many tabs open over several browsers, not just browser windows, but 3 different browser types. And they had many apps open for work, and apparently iPadOS couldn't cope with all this due to its RAM management issues. Without really touching upon all those browsers and tabs and apps that he's got opened, I'm pretty sure most computers wouldn't be able to deal with all that. I mean, what's running his computer? A fusion reactor? My biggest question is, why does he have all those things open? And how's he able to cope with all the data that he seemingly needs to have in front of him at all times? iPad's biggest strength is its limited nature. I don't mind having only 4 apps open simultaneously, or 8 apps if I attach the iPad to an external monitor. I can only look at so much and need only so much information available at any one time. In fact, I don't think I ever maxed out the 8 apps available. I want to get work done. I don't want to be distracted. Now, I don't want to judge. Maybe this gentleman's work demands that he needs all these things running, and somehow he makes it all work together to benefit him and his general productivity. But that's kind of my point. I don't. What I have works for me, and just because my iPad Pro can't do Starship Enterprise level computing doesn't mean it's not a computer. There's also an ignorance of iPads and iPadOS on full display here. My iPad hasn't refreshed the browser window because it's panicking over how many tabs I've had open for a long time. My wife is a student. She's got an iPad Pro, and you should see how many tabs are open on her browser on any given day, and she's never had a problem. I don't close down apps. They're waiting and ready for me in the background when I return to them, and they're in the same state as when I left them. My iPad Pro doesn't restart, doesn't throw a strop, doesn't explode or initiate World War III out of confusion. This chap also says that he hasn't shut down his computer for several months and everything's immediately available to him in an instant. And the suggestion there is that my iPad can't do that. This is despite the fact that all iPads have been instant on since the very beginning. No waiting around for anything to load in. Unless you've intentionally turned off the iPad, which you rarely have to do, everything simply reappears immediately when you push the power button, or the Touch ID or the Face ID acknowledges you. That login, in fact, is so quick that sometimes I forget my iPad is using my face to allow me to securely access my device. To answer his question, my iPad can most definitely do this. The main thing that really grounded my gears, so to speak, was his statement that he had said all this to, in quotes, prove the iPadOS is not a desktop OS. The fact is, I never asked him to prove anything to me. I don't care. You do your computing, I'll do mine. But let's just take that statement with the thought behind it. That's that the iPadOS is not a real OS. Who says? Why isn't it an actual OS? I mean, it's short for iPad operating system. So if it's not operating, what is it? Of course, they're silly questions. They're meant to challenge a nonsense statement. I do all my work on my iPad. I edit videos. I edit photos. I create podcasts. I draw badly, but my YouTube thumbnails eventually get done. I take notes. I write. I edit websites. I email. I collaborate. I make calls, videos, or voice. I consume content. What can I do on my iPad with its supposedly nixed OS that I could only do on a laptop or desktop? In fact, I could possibly do more. I guess my point is simply this: I couldn't do any of that if the iPadOS wasn't a real OS. The argument against it is frankly absurd. Now, some things within the OS could be improved, like the file system, for example, isn't great. But every year, incremental changes mean that you no longer need to jump through some stuff, as I once used to have to. iPadOS doesn't need to be macOS on an iPad. It does everything that I need and more. And to be quite frank, I feel like I'm only just scratching the surface. We are so far beyond the idea that it's just a niche product that it's ridiculous to say that. To say that it's got no discernible benefit other than watching YouTube videos in bed is ridiculous. Some people really do need to stick their heads above the PC tower that's sat on the table before them and just have a look and see what's happening in the real world. All this leads me to those statements that are made on X. I think I've already covered that iPadOS, though limited in some areas, can quite clearly hold its own in the OS Olympics. It doesn't need to be macOS Lite or macOS of any sort. The Mac uses an operating system designed for a different animal with different use cases, but there is some crossover between the iPad and a laptop, between the macOS and the iPadOS. But the fact is, the iPad is simply not just a MacBook Air replacement either. Now, that suggestion was probably made with the best intentions, but I think it comes across as condescending. Not to the machine, obviously, but actually to me personally and those like me, because there's an implication in that statement that I'm not using my iPad for real work. If I want to be taken seriously as a videographer, dare I say it, filmmaker, a writer and a creative, apparently I'll need to discard those childish things for me to be able to reach the next level and join the room with the big girls and boys. Yet, I've recorded and edited music videos using 2 iPhones and my iPad Pro. I've recorded and edited several short educational films against a green screen, again using just my 2 iPhones, my iPad Pro and the LumaFusion app. I've recorded and edited podcasts using external mics and passed them through a Scarlett 2 i2 audio interface connected to my iPad Pro. I've recorded and edited several videos for a charity that needed videos dubbing into several foreign languages using only my iPad Pro and an external wireless mic such as the M650 setup from Anker. And I've used my iPad to create social media campaigns, from collaborating, planning, to design, to implementation. The list literally goes on. If any of what I've said needs improving, well, it's me that needs to learn and develop the appropriate skills. It's not my devices needing to perform better. Is none of what I've just described real work? Well, of course it is. I think it's time that the iPad was afforded more respect as a content creating professional machine. And maybe as we enter this M4 era of portable computing, we'll see this mindset shift. In the meantime, I'll continue to create on and advocate for the iPad, and for that matter, the iPhones, which can all be combined to develop genuinely impressive and accessible professional content. And I do acknowledge once again that iPadOS does need to grow in certain areas. But as the time of recording, we've got WWDC 24 just around the corner, and Apple's apparent push into AI may very well make us see that the next evolution in computing comes from the most recent iPad Pro. The bottom line is this: if a Windows laptop works for you, go for it. If a MacBook Pro is your trusted go-to equipment, use it. If you only want a powerhouse of a desktop setup, then that's your prerogative. Keep using whatever works for you, whatever helps elevate your productivity and pushes you forward in all that. Because they're all great computers. But then, what is a computer? My iPad. Now, if you want to see the video where I unbox this thing, why don't you check that out here? And why don't you let me know in the comments how much you disagree with me, or how much you agree with me, or that you really don't care either way. I'd love to hear from you. Okay, until the next video, happy creating. on whatever device you've got.